Pippa, thank you very much for joining us on The Sports Agents. First of all, the process of the book with David Walsh. How did you find that whole experience of revisiting everything and all of your memories and putting them down with him?
Some of it's very intrusive. So it brings back a lot of emotions that I didn't deal with at the time. And something that Chris Hoy said the other when I watched his podcast was that every time you kind of have to talk about your past or what's happening to you, and it's kind of intimate and invasive, it leaves a certain amount of emotional baggage to deal with. And I found that each time that I had to write something, so David asked me to write basically kind of 10, 12 chapters of my life, which I thought were important. And some of them were really difficult to visit because I didn't deal with the issues at the time. Some of the questions, I think they were quite difficult for him to ask because he wasn't sure if I was used to having to answer them. So eventually I said to him, look, David, just say it the way you're going to say it and forget about if you're going to offend me or, think I'm going to be awkward with it.
You said just there that David, you felt at times was worried about he might offend you or say something the wrong way. And I have to say that I'm going to ask a question now that I hope I deliver in the right way to you. That what in the book there is a particular episode you talk about as a child and saving up because you enjoy putting on a dress and that's something that you're doing behind the scenes of everybody who knows you, obviously. This is a massive secret you're keeping. And when you start cycling and really getting into cycling, it feels like that's a brilliant way to try and put all that other stuff to one side because the cycling is almost a separate thing in your life. And it's a brilliant chapter because it helped me to understand a bit more about what that must feel like as a child going through that because you felt from a very young age.
Yeah, so I felt different from about the age of 5, that I didn't want to live in that kind of male world and deal with all the kind of rough and tumble. But I didn't know what it was because I didn't have the information. So, I kind of stumble along like you do as a child. And, you're basically an infant who's kind of learning each thing every day. So by the time I kind of got to the start of adolescence and I discovered cycling, and then I decided I was going to be a bike rider, even though it seemed totally crazy to everyone around about me. That allowed a separation from the kind of gender stuff, but it was always there because I hadn't learned the kind of mental techniques to deal with it, to bury it.
Was the focus on cycling so great that the conversations you were having in your head were able to kind of almost you were deliberately letting them go?
Only when I kind of reached. When I was just before turning professional, did I kind of invest my kind of mental self into it fully?
Into cycling fully?
Yeah.
So on the tour?
You don't have any mental capacity or mental space. It's all about recovery and then dealing with the race tactics and how you feel and stuff like that. So there's not a lot of time to kind of deal with the outside world. You're in this little bubble and everything that happens to you during that day, you kind of have to mull over at night time and process it. And if you've had a good day, it's fine. You can kind of let go of it quite quickly. But if you haven't had a good day, then you're kind of stuck in this place of self-loathing and demanding if you were asking yourself if you're going to be good enough.
And professional cycling, presumably, it may still be like this, I don't know, but back then was an incredibly male world, I'm guessing.
Yeah, like most sports were, so the male world kind of dominates the female world. And then, so you can't allow yourself any weakness to show any weaknesses. So I didn't.
Did you have masking kind of practices and behaviours that you would adopt?
I didn't let people in. So when, I'd have my friends who I talked to, and anybody else who came along and I didn't like them or they didn't like me, then that would make no difference to me. That I kind of learned the techniques to deal with what I'm dealing with. A lot of sports people talk about you kind of control the things that you can control and the other things you have to let go. I learned that quite quickly.
You also talk a lot about you. I mean, you hear this from a lot of sports people. Obviously, the grieving that you have at the end of a career, and however brilliant that career is. In fact, just this came up the other day, and I was quite surprised. It was Alan Shearer who was talking about. You think of somebody like him, pretty much doing everything they want in a career, and still, we were talking about the end and how it's never easy to finish a sports career at the highest level. And at the same time, you're now thinking about grieving for the end of somebody you have been as well. That you're about to make this transition. It's it must have been an unbelievably challenging mental state to be in.
The thing about my kind of sporting career, I realised it was going to come to an end. I'd had enough. Sort of physically, I was okay. Mentally, I'd had enough. I'd been doing it. I was in my 16th year. It started to kind of tell, and I don't want to keep travelling and staying in hotels and riding bike races and not being competitive enough for my ego and ambition. And that starts to kind of annoy you and kind of prey on, what am I doing here? Do I actually earn a place here? Am I better just to stop? So I saw that coming. And then I knew that then I'd have to deal with the kind of gender issues that were going to come up, because I decided probably 10 years earlier that I'd do my cycling career at 100% as well as I could, and then I would deal with the gender stuff afterwards. But during that 10 years there'd be moments when it came up again, and how do I deal with it when I'm a professional sports person and I'm on television and I can't deal with it, so then I have to bury it again.
And that's when you start your process of transition at the end of the career, in terms of not just the physical part, but the mental part. You able to move on to a certain extent and say, right, this is the start?
Not immediately. It took about 5 years.
Yeah, but that was the beginning of the start.
So I have to kind of descend into this hole of, right, you have to do something about this because you're not functioning as a human. So that took basically 5 years, because I got to such a low point with who I was and what I was doing, that
even though you said, you talk about in the book, you knew that was coming.
You knew it was coming, but you don't realise that how low you're going to have to go before actually you're going to have to deal with it. And then you seek professional help. And
you did reach some real lows.
There's lots of lows. So you have to go to that point of, right, what am I going to do here? So at that point, I was never suicidal. But certain people who transition are, and that kind of, there's a decision to be made then. Like how am I going to deal with my gender issues? And I sought to kind of.
What was the biggest
reach
fear?
Out. The biggest fear is probably rejection of the people around about you. How are they going to deal with it? The people in your life, you know what their character is, and what they like and dislike. And there's strong characters and weak and kind of slightly weaker ones, and you don't know how each of those kind of characters are going to deal with it. So sometimes you think, oh, this is a really strong kind of macho person. They're going to hate me, but they're actually okay with it. And then the people you think will be okay with it don't, because when somebody close to you transitions from one side to the other, it brings up a lot of questions for that person. So they start to ask themselves, am I okay with this? What would happen if that was me? Or what would happen if that was my partner or my wife or my husband? So it provokes a lot of questions for everybody around about you. Not just, I've been dealing, with those kind of answers and the questions that kind of go before it for probably, 15, 20, 25 years. But now I've introduced that world to everybody else.
Was part of that 5 years that you talked about to get yourself into a position where you could carry those closest to you and all of their questions and feelings as well on your shoulders?
No, I've reached a point with myself where I've stopped functioning, and I'm in the process of kind of rebuilding where I'm going, but I don't know where it's going to end. And for the people around about me, my closest people, they're also asking that same question: where is this going? Why are quite often the question of why are we not enough? As a part of your life, why is that not enough that they're there and you need to seek this other kind of place? So there's a lot of questions for them. If you think about it in terms of kind of sexuality, you're in a straight relationship and then suddenly you're not. Not everybody can deal with that.
No, and you can understand that.
And I understand that because I'm asking, how are they going to deal with this? So I understand it.
Did you find anybody that you could speak to who had similar experiences? And how hard is it to do that?
No, this is pre-internet. There's no
no chat rooms.
There's no forum or there just isn't. So you're dealing with it. Basically with the the kind of professional help that you're getting, and they kind of point you if you need a kind of therapy group or whatever. But it's not everybody's transition is different. So, for some people, it's about they have body dysphoria. I never had that. I needed to be seen in a kind of social context of being seen as female and living in that world. The body part, I just thought that basically for me, my body was the tools that I used for my career. So I didn't have the kind of same outlook on things about that. It just, I think I heard Chris Hoy saying, it was, you're used to your body being that tool and it functions and it's healthy and all the rest of it. And that's how I looked at my body. I wasn't in any way appalled by certain parts of it. So, for me, it was more a kind of, I need to integrate into a female world because that's where I feel more comfortable.
The world we're in right now, it feels the conversation about trans generally incites a lot of inflamed kind of opinions, and people get very angry on both sides of this. I don't know. It just feels like something that you have to tread so carefully around because it's not an easy conversation. By any stretch of the imagination, it's not an easy conversation when it comes to sport. And as a result, it feels like a conversation that gets buried quite a lot because people are so conscious of that, of being offensive or taking the wrong tact.
I think you have to ask yourself if you go back 10, 15 years, was it a topic?
No.
So why has it become a topic now? Because, whatever sport you're going to choose, there isn't a trans person in it. So I've started to say to people, remind me what the trans world record is in the 100 metres. Because there's this perception that suddenly there's all these trans women in the kind of female side of the sport. And there isn't one. There isn't one in swimming, tennis. I think the best example is the Scottish FA banned trans women from playing, but they don't have any. So how can you make an assessment of the impact of that person's on that sport if there aren't any people?
So what has happened then, Pippa? What has happened in the last, as you say,
10, 15 years?
10, 15 years?
From 10, 15 years. How has it ended up in this situation now?
Well, then it becomes a political thing. You look at the previous government, how poorly they functioned. So they need distractions for everything. So if it's immigrants or unions or trans people or now it's the ECHR, poor a job that they're doing, so that you don't think about when you're standing there trying to fill your car up and it's now $1.50 a litre and it used to be £1 or whatever. So you're not meant to think about that. You're meant to be concentrating on there's so many immigrants in this hotel and trans people have invaded women's sport, but it's just a smokescreen for the way that the political class functions.
So for you now, is trans inclusion in sport a valid debate at the moment, or is it a distraction?
It's a distraction. It's a distraction. I remember going into British Cycling at the start of their kind of, we're going to be trans inclusive. and I think there was 6 trans women that they had in the whole kind of membership of over 100,000 people, and they were all ordinary riders. You'd never heard of any of them. You never will. And then they came up with this ban, but it's and saying that you're going to have to prove that you're not banned from competing. So then you're looking at history, and have there been any trans world records? Have there been anybody who's competitive at an elite level or a world championships from Olympics? And no, there isn't. So then you realise that this hasn't got nothing to do with inclusion and everything to do with the distraction of not dealing with the problems of women's sport not being regarded at the same level as the men's side. Because women's sport is always seen as inspirational for somebody else. For somebody younger to come through and be inspired by that person. Whereas men's sport's just seen as sport. And nobody deals with that.
How do you find doing sport and exercise now in terms of your...
It hurts instantly, so I don't recover. And I noticed that straight away in the first 6 months. Out of breath, instantly, because my red blood cells are lower. Mm-hmm. And any kind of effort, as a male, you would recover the next day. Mm. Transitioning, it might take 2 days to recover. So then you're no longer an elite athlete because you can't have the training load.
Is exercise still very important to you, mentally and physically? Do you still get...
Only to stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you cycle for fun?
I cycle for health.
You wouldn't call it fun.
I don't call it fun. It's fun, but it's at a slower level, and I'm used to kind of riding quite fast. It's what I used to do. When you're a pro bike rider, the terrain is not a problem. It's the speed that you cover it at. So a hill, for me, a hill would be, right, I'm going to ride this side of gear, I'm going to ride that speed, and there'll be this level of pain. Whereas nowadays, I see the hill and I think, there must be a way around this.
I think that all the time.
Yeah, well,
I'd rather go 10k that way and avoid that hill.
Welcome to our world.
And now I have to use all the gears, which before I would look, I'd look at the gear and think, that might be a bit big. I'll just stand up for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Whereas I lost that capacity almost instantly because my hormone levels and my blood levels have changed completely. Because you don't retain what you had before. Your body functions with the hormones that it has at that time.
To just finish off, because we've had you for a long time already, Pippa, do you want to be an inspiration to trans sport? Do you want to be an inspiration to anybody competing now in a gender they don't want to be in?
I just want to see the kind of world leave trans people alone. Go back to where we were 10, 15 years ago, where nobody talked about trans people invading change rooms and toilets and all that kind of stuff, because we weren't doing it then and we're not doing it now. So the question of trans inclusion is just a smokescreen for the poor politicians that are involved in those discussions. And I'm not really in that kind of place where I'm going to debate whether I exist or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I find that's really poor. So come and debate with us. Well, you wouldn't ask somebody who, a racist and somebody who was of colour, to sit there and argue which one of them, is right. You wouldn't do that. So I've got no intention of kind of being in that debate kind of room with somebody who thinks I don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not going to happen.
Pippa, thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate your time.
And continued success with the book, which is anybody who reads David Walsh and thinks they know your story. When you read this book, it's a very different experience and an important one as well.
I should thank you for being in charge.
I get a lovely lunch as well.
Yeah.
So. Thank you so much,
by Pippa and David Walsh is out now.
The Sports Agents
with Gabby Logan and Mark Chapman.